Ola, Chakra, subs and guests, welcome. We got another raw one. It's me, the homie George. Hey, George.
Hey, thanks.
So, hell yeah. So we got a juicy one. Excuse my French, actually. He double hockey stick. It's on religion today. It's gonna be it's gonna be an interesting one, and we're gonna cover some bases. Me and George have a little bit different perspectives on religion, because of the history and relationship we've had with it and our experiences. And so we're going to share that. It's going to be some pseudo peer stuff. You know what's up. And so, yeah, just to dive into it, my interaction with religion started at a pretty young age. I went to Lutheran preschool. I knew all the jingles. They told me Jesus loved me. I figured that out at a young age. And I also knew just like the basics, Noah's Ark, like other stories like that. And I knew that God kind of controlled, like he had this like force on everything. Everything was because he like chose it to happen. It was predestined in some way. And so when I entered a really tough period in my life around the time I was 12 or 13, I lost faith. I didn't believe there was a God because I thought, oh, if God loves me and God controls everything, why would he do these terrible things to me? And so with that came a very dark period in my life, and I didn't have hope. I didn't have faith, and I was without God. And thankfully, I reconnected with him in high school via a youth group, and I found one of the dearest mentors to me through that institution of that church at the time. My old youth pastor was really tight and just a guide for me back in the day. And so, total blessing to have him in my life and have that connection through church. And into my adult life, my connection just keeps growing and growing. And so, I haven't really identified with a specific denomination of churches. It's always been a challenge for me. But I love a good sermon. I like worship and I love connecting with God. And so I've been to Buddhist temples, um, done meditation stuff, even been to spiritual unity up here, which is kind of like almost like a pseudo. There's a lot of like new genres, new little subsections of Christianity that are pretty hip. And so I like to explore, I like to engage in it. But yeah, enough about me. George, what's your interaction and take on religion with your upbringing in your life?
I remember you talking about your youth pastor and how he was really helpful for you at a time in your life that you were able to share. And that's what it's kind of about, right? It's like having that connection and community is a big deal. I did the same thing when I was younger. I was brought up in a pretty strict religious belief system. Starts with Catholicism, fundamentalism, moved into evangelical, Pentecostal, been kind of around the block, from the really strict hell and damnation to the introduction of Jesus and the love and the light, and that all of that came along with Christianity. And going from being very young and having to like recite scripture and memorize scripture, going from that to watching um, it evolve into healings and speaking in tongues and a lot of different progression that I've seen in the church since I was very young. And I think for me, I shut down religion because of that. I think it was a lot of it for me was I didn't understand it. It didn't make sense to me. I was one of those kids that questioned everything. I was probably a pain in the butt, but I was constantly questioning everything. And if it didn't make sense to me, I was asking why. I was asking how. I didn't understand how, Noah's Ark worked. How did that work to where, you have these animals and you're able to save the world and save all these animals, and how somebody lived in the belly of a whale and things like that. Because I was being told at a certain point in my life that you have to believe this. This is, fact. This is God's word. And I didn't understand it, when I was younger. And then I saw, honestly, a lot of folks that were going to church and that were attending these services and doing this stuff on a regular basis, but they didn't seem happy, and they weren't exactly living this heavenly world. They were struggling. They were still alcohol, drugs, anger, narcissism, control, all of those things were still there. I thought, that's Jesus was about love and peace. And so I kind of blocked it out of my life, and I went kind of a different route. I was more focused on corporate. I was focused on bringing raising a family, but I wasn't focused on the spiritual side of it. So the religion, breaking free from that religion, kind of just took me away from spirituality altogether. And so I was kind of in that same place at a certain point in my life. So I went without God in my life for a very long time. I did go to church. I felt like I had to take my kids to church because that's what you're supposed to do, right? And so I started off with a Catholic church, and I started getting flashbacks of when I was a kid, and I was like, no, we're not doing that. And so we tried more open churches, more Christian churches, and still to this day, my family goes to do kind of a more open Christian church, where it's accepting of more people. So a long journey for me after turning it off for a very long time, but getting to where I am now and having God back in my life is very different. So yeah, it's a journey, but I was always the one that questioned everything, and I didn't understand. I didn't understand how. The biggest break for me was I didn't understand how somebody that could have been born on the other side of the world, that was never introduced to Jesus, could possibly burn in hell forever. I didn't understand that concept, and not everybody believed that, but in the circles that I grew up in, that was what I was being taught. You had one way, and that was the only way. And if you did not follow that way, you were going to burn in hell. And that's a very tough childhood to have if you truly have these fears instilled in you at a young age. It's like, I'm going to burn in hell. Holy cow, what does that feel like? What does that look like? And to be that young and to be in that state isn't good. And, being in addiction now, being in mental health and in the mental health circles, trauma is obviously at the core of all of this, and fear is at the core of all of this. And now we're at a point where religious trauma is a real thing, and it's being talked about consistently in treatment because of people that have been damaged, as a very young age from religion, and the dangers of it. That there's obviously a lot of good stuff that comes along with religion. You talked about it: connection, community, music, a positive message, something maybe to work on, yourself. But I find that when obedience and fear come in, that's kind of where I break, because in my recovery, fear and is at the core of all of our issues, mental health issues. There's at the core of addiction, at the core of any kind of mental health issues, you'll find fear at the core of that. And anything that is preaching that today, I'm just not in line with.
You spoke about being in that religious world and then moving into corporate and that kind of taking place of that. And in a way, they're both kind of similar, right? They're both institutions, and a corporate company, whatever, like they have a goal, increase profits, growth. Institutions like religion also have similar goals, right? They want to grow. And so even as morbid as the idea that you mentioned of somebody who doesn't hear the name of Jesus is going to die and burn in hell, even if they were a good person, in a way that's more fuel for the institution, because if their followers are under that belief, the religion's going to spread like wildfire. If that's a kind-hearted person, they're going to tell everybody and anybody about this guy. And so um, those institutions have goals. And with both of those institutions, I think there is a bit of fear that fuels both, you know, and maybe fear of, you know, your job and working for the man, like that's out of fear of not having a place to sleep at night, like not having money to afford food. You fear the financial security that you have. And so religion's a different thing. It's a lot of fear of death. I think a lot of people are afraid of what's on the next side. Nobody really knows for sure. We have, you know, reported near-death experiences and what people describe as God interacting with that. And it is kind of a lot of these meaningful things that we've already mentioned here, you know, like people want to say like it's love, it's light, it's a benevolent force in some way, you know. And so um, corporate being an institution that's completely founded on just man stuff, it's just man, money, very worldly, fleshy things. Like religion, I think the hope is that it's based on the word of God, and it's all good stuff, and it's helping the masses and helping people in some way. But the interesting thing about this this faith in the stories, if that ark was real, if they really got two animals on that thing, like if Jesus was a real man, all this stuff that people have archaeologically like researched and even proven in some ways, a lot of religions, word of mouth stories, us keeping track of stuff, a lot of religions have said there was a major flood. And maybe I think archaeologically people have seen, oh yes, there have been very high points of land underwater at a point. And so before this stuff was written down, people were just communicating stories word of mouth. And so it's kind of a silly idea to me that people can just kind of willy-nilly, like religions, they are kind of made up in a way. Not all of them. And I think some are based on real stories, and maybe some stories are metaphorical more than others, like in the Bible. But I have more faith believing in older religions for some reason. Religions with prophets like Buddha, Muhammad, like the Quran, the Bible, Torah, like these ancient scripts. I almost have more faith in believing in those rather than something like Mormonism or Scientology. It almost sounds like some kind of like willy-nilly, like we're going to throw out this institution and it's going to have some kind of financial benefit to us. I was listening to this guy describe Scientology, and it's really concerning. They really exploit people in that, and they charge them a lot of money, and people think it's their reality. It's their religion, but it's this kind of like pseudo messed up cult, multi-level marketing thing, to where it's just some guy made up some story and made up some kind of spiritual interpretation of our reality and why we do things that are wrong and how to cleanse that. And he made a whole scheme and took advantage of a lot of people. And so, you know, maybe I could make some kind of willy-nilly thing like that. Maybe I could be like, hey, all you people down there, you need me. You need me for the afterlife. You need me to talk to the big guy upstairs, and you got to give me money.
Yeah. So what happens when you and that's why we got to be careful, right? Because it's about connection. It's about feeling something maybe that is something we haven't felt before, you know. So I promise you that the people that are part of Scientology, they believe that they're being helped. You know, there's something there for them, and maybe they are being helped in a lot of ways in their own way. They're probably being manipulated at the top in getting them to come back, and but I promise you, what brings people back at first is that love, that connection, that harmony, that good word. But then the rules start coming, right? And that's what happened with Catholicism and the church, right? It's like now you have to follow this way, and you have to, money to the church, and you have to show up, and you got to be there every week, and do that. But where I think where we struggle, with people taking advantage of us is that we find something in that. It's real and it feels awesome. It's like I've had those moments in church. I've had those moments outside of church. But it's that fear of that, with the rules that come along with it, that keeps people coming back a lot of times. And that's that control, is like, now you have to keep coming back, and you have to keep supporting the church. Um that's the fear that's instilled in that. Or you might, you have that fear of death, you're going to go to hell, whatever they're telling you, whatever they're feeding to you, because now they got you sucked in, and now they can control and manipulate to keep you coming. I'm not saying that all religion is like that. We're talking about, something like Scientology, or something that is kind of hard to believe, but if you look back at the stories in the Bible, they're just as hard to believe, in a lot of ways. You can go back to history, and of course, there were massive floods. I mean, if you go back to Egypt, and you look at, the archaeology, and yes, there were major floods, probably a very big one that the story kind of kicked off on. And the whole Jesus story of him being here. And man, that is an amazing story, right? I mean, this is a guy that's come to this earth one way or another, however you believe it, whether it's, miracle and glory or whatever. This guy is living a life that we're supposed to be living, right? He's teaching us how to live this life on this earth. So whether you put Jesus up here, or he's down here, or whatever, if you're trying to follow him, then you're trying to live a life that is free from sin. So that's all I get out of it. I don't have to dig into all of it. I don't have to know all of it. I don't have to read every scripture. I don't have to argue any of it. I get it now because of my recovery. And I want to live that life. I want to live a sin-free life on the rest of the life that I have here, because that is the awakening. That is the seeing that there's a lot of shit that's been building up in me, a lot of damage, a lot of trauma. There's a lot of shit here. I'm trying to find that love within me, and that's what Jesus talks about. So that's where I'm trying to stay connected. And now that spirituality side of me is like flowing now, because I get it more. It's not about fear and damnation and all of those things. So when fear comes into it, I don't have a problem with religion. I have a problem with the church. When the church controls people, with rules and with fear and with obedience, and you must follow this, then it loses me, because in my recovery, I'm recovering from life. I'm recovering from all of those traumas. I'm trying to find the peaceful, loving guy within me. And man, that side of Jesus makes sense. It all makes sense. The fear and damnation and all of that other control stuff is what I'm trying to escape from. I'm trying not to be that guy anymore. I'm trying not to be controlling. I'm trying not to be irritated, not to be mad, not to be angry. And all of those things come back to me, and not and loving myself, and trying to find that calming, all we talked about it, right, is calming all that mind, the crazy mind, to find that peaceful, loving man that's underneath here somewhere. you know it's hard to find, but that's what I'm looking for. And I'm looking for those mentors that I can learn from, that are helping me in this journey. It's very different than how I used to look at religion before, where it's like, okay, I need to go to church or I'm going to go to hell. I need to follow these rules, and I need to do this, or I have consequences to pay. I don't look at it that way anymore.
Yeah, and looking at it that way is just so poor for people's well-being and mental health. You know, it's like this pressure of, if I don't do this, I'm not good enough to go to heaven. I'm a bad person. I'm going to burn in hell. I feel like the hope in most all religions and even churches and stuff like that is just, they want people to be good people, you know, and I think churches kind of lose that value when you do have people in it, or maybe like the lead pastor or something like that, and the tone is just very judgmental and negative, and there isn't much light in it. But I feel like the hope is that everybody's trying their best to be a good person and be benevolent and kind to others in some way, like Jesus, you know. He was a model for that. And I think when churches operate like that, that's just so good. And the way that goes hand in hand with um, just people's energies being positive and negative, I think a lot of what opening up to God is, and what opening up to love and life's possibilities and just feel goods, is just unguarding your heart and just being vulnerable to experiencing life for all that
Yes.
it is. Because I think when we are closed off like that, when our heart is guarded, we're not open to receiving all that compassion that is available out there.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And in my own journey and trying to understand my family, we talked about this last time. I shared a little bit about my journey and my family, is through my addiction and the way that I was living life before I caused a very toxic family, a family that was at each other's throats, that was arguing, not supporting each other, that was isolating. They were struggling with their own anxiety, their own mental health issues, their own addictions. In my recovery, I was sober for almost a year before I kind of had this clarity and understanding, because I was suffering still. I was suffering a lot, and I was suffering within myself. My anxiety was so high, and I couldn't figure out why my life was falling apart still. I'm sober, right? Everything should be going good. But I wasn't able to control the situation. So my anxiety was getting higher and higher. I wasn't able to control my son's addiction. I wasn't able to control, my son suffering because of his anxiety. I couldn't control, those things. And so it drove me to a point of, man, we talk about surrender and that cry, it's like, God, if you're there, I need you. And that's all I can talk to is my own experience, right? I had this moment where I was just like, please, give me something. If you do exist out there, and I'm sorry I haven't been paying attention, but I'm asking for help now. And I didn't expect what I got. I really got some clarity that it was all me, and I had to work on myself, and I had to work on not being that damaged person and showing that damaged person to my kids and my family. So internally, I have to learn how to not be anxious and not be irritated, not be angry. Well, as I'm learning this stuff, right? I'm learning that when I bring down my anxiety and I bring down all of that stress and the fears and stuff like that, that I'm feeling more loving. I'm feeling more peaceful. I'm feeling like a kid again. I want to just have fun. And those other big things aren't weighing me down anymore, not as much as they used to. And now I want to share that love, and now I realize that if I'm not in that state, that's when my kids started coming back to me. So if I'm in a peaceful, loving state, that's the true, authentic me. That's the love, and that's what attracted my kids back to me. And I'm still working on it. I know that if I react angrily, or if I judge them, or if I try to control them, I take a step back in our healing. So what I found in religion is that a lot of the times people that are part of a certain religion, they judge the people that are not part of that religion, and they do it out of their own fear. We talk about that. You were mentioning, a lot of this comes from fear. Well, fear of what, right? I mean, fear of death, you know, fear of not knowing, you know, fearing of not being able to control the situation. When people die, we can't control it. um, Maybe our identity is tagged to that religion. This is what I've known, this is what I've preached my whole life, this is what I know, my identity. Just like my corporate career, man, I was tagged to that identity, and that's why I had such an attachment to it, and I couldn't let it go. I was going to hold on to it with everything I've got, because this was what I believed in. This was my whole life. I committed everything to this. And I was not going to go down without a fight that this wasn't the right way for my kids to live life. It took my world to start falling apart for me to look at my kids and ask them how they see life. And they're looking at the corporate world very different. They're looking at the church very different than I was. And so in that, I started having to, in healing my family, helping to heal myself, I realized that I need to see life through my kids' eyes. I have to get to know my kids and see how they look at life. And in that transition of learning how to do that is when I realized that fear was at the core of all of this. And unconditional love is the answer. And it's everything that Jesus is talking about, is turning the other cheek. It's really being able to be with somebody that is anxious, that is mad, that is irritated, and still love them, knowing that this comes from their own suffering. So when it comes to fear and those things, man, they're so huge to me now, because it's that fear, that underlying fear, that controls us. And I think that in some churches and religions, they get that, they get it. And that's why they're able to press certain buttons and, get us um, to keep coming back in a lot of ways. The church that I go to now is we go because we love it. It's great music. It's a great connection. It's an opportunity for me and my family to break away and just not be in the chaos of the world for a little while. So it's always a good thing. It's always, to me, it's a good thing. It's how I interpret it now. Is like I can go in there and say, oh, he's going to say something bad. He's going to, and I can be that way. And I was that way a lot of my life. And now I'm like, man, I'm going to get everything good out of this that I possibly can get, because it's all great stuff. I'm here with my family. It's music, it's connection, it's everything that I love. And when the fear and the hell and the damnation and those things come up, I just see it for what it is and I let it go. And we talk about those things, me and my family, and we talk about those things, what fear is and how it impacted me, and how it controls us as people. So it's awesome, to be able to go to church again, without having a negative attitude, and always trying to argue it or prove it wrong or something.
Yeah, and that religious, ritualistic activity stuff, worship and just joining in community and just listening to a service, it feels good. And I think that what keeps people like coming back, and that kind of is that it's that pressure gauge of how benevolent is this church, and how bad is it? How much is judgment and fear taking over, and how good is it? For me personally, I kind of got down to Greek Orthodox churches when I moved up here to Denver, just because chanting is just such a good experience for me. I just enjoy it, the vibrations and doing it. Something about it's really cool. And so there's a lot of those things. And I think a big proponent too is just the community that comes along with church. People really love that and enjoy that. And me personally, like I enjoy being able to be in a setting like that and talk about God as well with other people. And so I wanted to bring it back to you though, because you kind of shared in that last thing you said about how there was this time you were kind of like in desperation. There was like a lot of fear and you kind of gave it up to God, and you were just like I don't know what else. Like, help me out, dude. Like, if you are out there. And it sounded like there was a major shift in your heart. How much of that do you think was God, and how much of that do you think was you?
That's a good question. Yeah. I can't say that a lot of it was me because I was really looking for something outside of me. I was looking for, I had been here. I had been in my mind. My mind goes crazy. And that's a lot of the reason why I was suffering so much, is because all I was doing is trying to figure it out, figure it out, figure it out. There's got to be an answer. There's got to be a solution. There's got to be, I've got to be able to fix this, and that is what surrender is. It's just like you give up. You give up. You're like, I don't have the answer. um I Part of it for me was I was a know-it-all, right? I had to be in control, and I had to show people that I knew I had the answers, because if I didn't have the answer, that was the fear, right? If I didn't have the answer for life and death, yeah, that's a pretty tough fear to have within you, especially when your kids are coming to you asking you, what that's all about. This internal shift that happened for with me was I was looking for help, and it was something beyond me that I had never tapped into before, and it was a clarity that um, really helped me to understand my own mind and understand what I needed to focus on to find this peace within me. But it started off by being very clear that the way that I was interacting with the world, the way that I was reacting to the world, was the problem. It wasn't the world that was the problem. It wasn't my kids and my family that was the problem. It was how I was reacting to it that was the problem. And I needed to be able to respond to the world in a peaceful way instead of being irritated, being mad, having to control, having to fix. Now I was able to receive. You were talking about that. It's like, okay, now I realize that if I bring down all of this stress and I'm able to calm my mind down, I'm in a position to now receive, which that means is now I can actually think of creative things. I can actually think about the possibilities of life. I can be open-minded to everybody and everything. So yeah, I don't know that I can't say, okay, now I know God, but I would say it's more like I have more of a connection in understanding love, which is now what I understand God to be. The essence of God is love. And to show that love, we have to show kindness. And what kindness means, we talked about that before on our podcast, is being able to see somebody that's suffering and their actions may not be showing that they're love. Their actions are showing the opposite of that, but knowing at the core that they are love, and knowing that everybody's capable of love, is pretty cool. So it's, I don't know that I have any more answers than I did before, except for it's shifted internally for me. Shifted that, okay, now I need to work on myself. I see those things that I was doing that were causing me suffering and pain in my life, and now I can do something different. I can calm my mind down. I can be more peaceful and calm and loving. And a lot of that has to do with connection, music, positive message, gratitude, gratefulness. I learned how to meditate as a result of this. And, when I was a kid, stuff like meditation, that stuff was demonized. It wasn't even, it was considered outside of the religion. So it was cast aside as being bad. And so I didn't ever open my mind up to mindfulness and open my mind up to meditating and what that was, and how to understand thoughts and things like that. I blocked a lot of that stuff out because I wasn't willing to go there. was, you didn't really, even talk about those things, and let alone the hippity dippity stuff, as a macho Mexican dude, meditation and that stuff is all woo woo. We make fun of that stuff in my culture. We don't embrace it. And so for me to now embrace and be open-minded to everything that will help me to bring down, my anxiety, to bring down make sure that I'm not in a depressed state and bring my balance. All of these things is stuff that I have shut my mind down to for a lot of my life. And to be open-minded and to want to learn more about myself, man, that's an awesome journey, because I'm not stuck in the past, and I'm not worried about what's going to happen in the future anymore. I'm living life now, and it's way better. And I know that the possibilities are endless, and life can continue to just get better and better and better. So I don't know what the answer is to, when we die, where we go, all of that stuff. I'm learning more about myself, which is helping. The more that I learn about my internal world, the closer I get to understanding that, and I stop looking externally for those answers. And I still love to learn, but I don't go to a church necessarily for them to tell me how to think and what to believe. I go in there with an open mind, and I can go into that church. I can go into anywhere. I can go into any situation, hopefully, and be in a position to where I can gain the positives out of it, and not react to the negatives.
Yeah, and I think what you were talking about with mindfulness and just that practice of just constructively spending time with yourself in prayer or journaling or self-reflection, it's so valuable. Even if people don't have faith in God or follow any kind of religion, I hope that everybody does that, because I think in a way it is kind of that synonymous, like tapping into oneself and God, like what you were describing. Like, God was this external thing that did help you, and you got an answer outside of yourself. Um, but also there is this journey of mindfulness and understanding yourself that goes along with it. And so I think spending time in that state of solitude, to where it's constructive and it's almost ritualistic, just that downtime, I think is so good for people. And I think it helps them tap in to spirit that's within them and that's within everything, and being able to do that, being able to tap into that source of love within ourselves and express that, has an immense effect on our environment and on our reality, on our connections and our relationships. It's this as above, so below, inside outside kind of concept. And I think you're talking about rules and stuff with churches and when it goes south. I think the worst thing that I've seen and experienced in churches today is just kind of this rejection of women who've had premarital sex and are pregnant in some way before they get married. Like, it's really shunned in some church communities. And then other people who are afraid to come out of the closet because they're like, my parents are going to disown me if they know I'm homosexual, because that doesn't fly with them because they're Christian or whatever. Right. And so those two things are pretty sad to see. And I think that is that fear, that judgment that creeps up and resurfaces. And I feel like another thing that you were describing is just this reactionary mindset. And I think a lot of the times religion would define acting out of a reactionary mode towards fear or anxiety is probably sinning. It's probably sinning because you're exhibiting some behavior that might have a negative effect, a negative charge, and a negative tone on the people around you. And so I think at the end of the day, the main message behind all of this is just acceptance of ourselves and acceptance of others too, because at the end of the day, we're all worth it and we're all loved. And the opposing of that is something that we as humans struggle with all the time. The feeling of not being good enough, the feeling of not being worthy to be loved, being rejected, or being alone in some way. God could be a tool in that sense of like there's always this benevolent energy, benevolent positive charge access to me. I just got to tap into it.
Yeah. Tapping into that is pretty interesting. And understanding, like what you said, I mean, just being able to break away and to have prayer, to break away and to meditate, to break away and even to read, those are a lot of things that we're so busy as a culture that we don't do that stuff as regularly enough to at least calm our minds down enough to open it. We're so caught up in our own self that we don't realize that we're not open to the world, right? We're so worried about our own fears and our own insecurities that it doesn't allow us to connect with each other. I'm more worried about what you're thinking of me. I'm more worried about what you think of, how I'm acting, how I look, do I smell, all of these things that get in the way of, connection, because when you start to make these connections that are, you don't have that judgment in either direction, and when you don't have that friction, um then you're able to actually really connect, right? I mean, I realized that with my kids. I didn't know that I was judging my kids, but every time that they did something I didn't like, I would judge them. I would tell them that they needed to do it a different way. I would judge their action, but I didn't know why they were making the decision. And that's the huge part of it, right? Is I wasn't following the path with them to see why they would make that decision. They made the decision, and I just wanted to come down and say, no, why did you make this decision? Well, if I followed their journey backward, I probably would understand their experience better, and what they're going through, what they were mentally, and why they made that decision. If I'm not there to help them with that whole process, then all I'm doing is judging. You need this, you need to do what I do,
Yeah,
but
you
if
want
I
to understand them, you want to get their perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very different way of looking at life, right? It's now I need to understand how they see life, their perspective. And I can't do that when I'm always about me. I'm always thinking about myself. I'm always in fear of what people think of me, or I have to be a certain way for somebody. I have to be, the with me, I had to be the corporate guy. I had to be the biker, or whatever that is. And so you get attached to that, and so breaking down that was huge. I finally got it. If I want to be there to understand their journey and how they see life, then I have to do that for everybody. I can't just be that for my kids. I have to be that way as a person, which means that I have to be different. I can't judge anybody. I can't just say, I'm not going to judge just my kids, but I'm going to judge the rest of the world. That's just how we do things, right? Those are just programs. It's like I judge you or I don't. I either feel insecure and I judge you, or I don't. If I don't feel insecure, then I don't judge. If I don't fear things, I don't judge. The reason why I judge my kids is because I fear that they're making a wrong decision. I fear that they're going to have consequences for their actions. I have fear in my heart. That's why I get like, don't do that. You got to do it different. You got to do this. That's the fear within me. But if I was following their journey and saw the way that they see life through their journey, I would know what emotions they've had, what kind of relationships, connections they have, all of this stuff. And so I would really understand why they would make a decision like that. And if I'm there with them, boy, I sure as hell have a lot more influence on that decision, going, what direction that decision ends up going, what those choices look like, but they're not going to listen to me if I'm just out here all the time, because they're like the same way I was, right? You don't know what's going on in here. You don't know what's going on in my heart and my head. So don't feed me this bullshit. Don't feed me your way, because you don't know me. You don't know what's in here. You haven't followed my journey. And, I realized that I didn't know my kids to that level, right? I need to follow, be with in the journey with them. I have to know them intimately. It means we share our loves, we share our fears, we share our insecurities, we share our anxieties. Now I can understand why his anxiety may have caused him to act a certain way, but instead we judge their actions, and then they're like, you don't know me. What? You just disconnected completely. And as a parent, you don't know why. So this is at the core of who we are as people. Not that I just wanted to not judge my kids. I needed to learn not to judge anybody. And the reason why I judged at the core was my fears, my insecurities. If somebody walks in and they're loving life and they're doing great, I mean, the old me would find something. They'd find something in them, you know. This guy's annoying, he talks too much, or I would find something because of my own insecurities. For some reason, it's a sick thing. That judgment is a tough thing because it starts with your own insecurities and your own fears, and it causes us to be that way, and it causes separation. And when that's taught in anywhere, when I see it anywhere, in corporate, in school system, in church, it doesn't matter, in addiction, in treatment, we're there trying to help these guys. And if you're not doing it with empathy first and showing love and compassion, you're never going to get anywhere with them, right? You're going to come down, try to beat it into them. You got a tough love, right? You're going to try, and they're going to do the same thing that I did. It's just like, dude, you don't know me. You get the hell out of my face. I'm tired of people telling me what to do. You don't know what's going on in here. And then that's what's so awesome about recovery is you go to a place like our clinic, and you've got time to break away from all of that, and you got somebody to talk to, and you're starting to figure out who you truly are, outside of all this damage, all the trauma, outside of all this reactionary side. That's the sin that we're trying not to be. I don't want to be yelling at my kids, irritated and mad. Those are the sins that I'm trying not to be anymore. And so trying to live that life is very difficult, and it's a daily journey, because those programs keep coming back, and I wanted, somebody does something I don't like, that it comes back. But now it's like, catch myself. I got to understand why they came to that decision. If I don't understand it, then I'm judging. I'm making assumptions.
Yeah, I feel like what you're describing and also what religion is just kind of like a manual on how to do this, how to do life, how to be a human being, and to choose the good vibes over the bad vibes. And I think for me, just to put it as simply as possible, I feel like I've recently discovered that the biggest shift I've made in my life in a positive way is that I feel very comfortable being myself. And I used to cause a lot of distress to myself,
Heck yeah.
not being able to be myself because I feared what people would think of me, and I wanted to fulfill some sort of expectation, and I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be cool. And so now, I'm not perfect, but I feel freed in a lot of ways because I'm much more comfortable being myself. Now, when it comes to my truest, most authentic, my highest self, I feel like I get to access that and be in that zone when I am serving something greater than myself.
Mhm.
And, people want to imagine heaven and hell being places like that we go to when we die. And the way I look at it is I feel like heaven and hell are places on earth. If you act out of sin, if you're stealing stuff from people, if you're hurting people left and right, people aren't going to like you. And in a way, you're always going to have to be watching your back. And I feel like that kind of fear and paranoia, you're going to be burning in flames. It's going to suck. And there's going to be a lot of passive suffering that you encounter because you're just doing terrible shit. Whereas I feel like heaven on earth is just serving a power greater than yourself and just being the best version of who you are. And it could be super freeing and liberating in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, to me, I finally realized that this world is beautiful. I mean, I was skiing yesterday, or day before yesterday, we went snowboarding, and man, if you were going to build a heaven, you couldn't build it more beautiful. I mean, I'm on the gondola and I'm looking at this. The sun is shining. The snow on the mountains just looks so beautiful, and you have all of these, God's children playing. They're just having an amazing time. And I'm like, man, you couldn't build a more beautiful heaven, right? But how many times have I been on this gondola, and how many times have I actually felt it? You know, I've been there a million times. I've been hundreds of times, right? And I've always been in my head, especially when I was an alcoholic, right? I'm like, when's the next drink? When does the lodge open up? So I can get back down there. Uh, but when you're able to now see how beautiful this world is, you start to realize it's my perception, it's my perspective on how I'm looking at it. It's obviously beautiful. You couldn't draw a better picture of heaven than what you could the Rocky Mountains that day, with the sun shining, the beautiful snow, and everybody playing on it. I couldn't draw a better heaven than that, right? So it comes down to how I'm looking at it and how I'm appreciating it and my gratefulness for it, right? If I'm not in that place to where I can appreciate it, that's a sin. I think that's a sin. That's against myself. I'm not allowing myself to be authentic and be real and just appreciate the moment. Um, to to be able to understand that I have that power within me to create a heaven hell right here on earth is so freeing, to understand that life can be amazing. It can be like heaven. I don't know what happens after we physically leave this place, but what I do know now is if I keep working on myself and I keep getting, this damaged version of me, this character that I play that's reactionary to the world, that's a character for people. If I can shed that guy and I can be this real authentic person, and I could live in that authentic self, but man, that's loving, that's kindness, it's happiness, if I could live there, but the world takes me out of it a lot, and so I want to live there all the time. And I know that I can do that as long as I keep working on this stuff. um, and stop blaming others and those external things, right? So that's another thing, is like that all that external stuff switched internal for me, and that also means heaven and hell, right? I mean, from external, oh my God, when I die, oh my God, I'm going to burn in hell. That doesn't mean anything to me anymore. What life is to me now is I'm not going to live in hell in here anymore and in here. And that means I've got to work on myself, and I need to bring all of that down. That damaged person needs to be gone. I need to work on a new life, a new atmosphere. Little nonprofit plug there for atmosphere, but creating a new atmosphere, of love, that is a place where you don't feel judged. No matter what religion you are, you don't feel judged. No matter what sex you are, you don't feel judged. No matter who you are, your authentic self. It's time to show who you are, who that authentic person is, and that's outside of all of these damages that cause us to react in a negative way. So if I'm being positive, that means I'm working on it at the core. I'm not being fake, and just putting on a face, and then I'm damaged inside. I'm being authentic, and if I'm damaged, I'm being authentic about that. If I'm struggling that day, I'm being authentic about that. If I'm having a great day, I'm being authentic about that. I'm no more family secrets. No more putting on a face of I'm perfect. but behind the scenes we're struggling. I believe that we are perfect. We are all perfect. That internal person, that love, that kindness, that unconditional person that is within us, that's perfect. And God made us that way. Everything else that has caused us to be damaged, to react to the world in a negative way, that's very different, you know. So yeah, it's come along full circle for me for sure when it comes to understanding who I am, who my authentic self is, and working on that so I can be that loving, peaceful guy. Because, like you said, if you are able to help others and be in service of others, I am no longer in my head, right? I am no longer all about myself. And now I can be there for others. And even if that means just being able to sit there um, peacefully when they're in a time of need and just need somebody, I'm not in my own head thinking of myself, me. And when I get together with that person, I'm not telling them all my problems, right? I can just be, and we have trouble just being, just being. When there's we've had a lot of things happening at the clinic where a lot of personal issues, some close deaths of family, and some real struggles that people are going through with staff and stuff like that. And finding out that, or realizing that, man, life is full of suffering. We're going to get hit left and right, and it's hard not to react to it. It's hard not to be impacted by all of this suffering that's happening on a daily basis. But that's our daily journey, is to work on not reacting in a negative way and being there for people. So when somebody is struggling, let's say there was a death that happened with a friend of ours, the old me really would be like, how can I fix this? How can I help you right now? Can I make you dinner? Can I fix this for you? Because that's the fear in me, right? Fix, when maybe that person just needs you to sit with them, you know um help them in other ways, but we want the quick fix because we fear, so it's a different way of looking at life. I just want to meet people where they are, and that's a big thing we talk about as peers, where they are. What happens when you preach, when people preach, they're not meeting people where they're at. It's like, you need this in your life, you need this in your life. Well, maybe you're not ready for that right then, in their life. You have to walk the journey with them. You have to at least understand what their experiences are, how they feel, how they've experienced life, and how they see life before you can really help others. But when you do, it's magical, and you can really be like we talk about at peers. You're not alone anymore. You're with somebody in their journey, and when they're struggling, you can be there for them, and they understand it, and they trust you, and you're part of the journey with them. And you're not preaching at them, trying to tell them how to live their life, and what they need to do to be happy. It's very different, and telling people how to be.
I think with man and the ego, there is this interpretation of time being a linear progression from point A to point B. And that tendency that you were mentioning of trying to fix something with some kind of emotional turmoil, somebody's going through grief and you want to take them out to dinner just to fix it, right? I think that is a function of ego, because it is this linear progression of like, okay, we were here, now we're now. They had this issue, we got it solved, right? But I feel like the reality of time and the reality of emotional processing is that it is kind of this cyclical thing, and just being able to be present with somebody and just be with somebody could go a long way, because a lot of the times that heavy grief and other things that go on in our lives that can be traumatic, they do kind of linger. We could process these things and we could learn to live with the stuff we've been through. But I think at the end of the day, it's never a point A to point B. You had this messed up thing. It hurts. Now you're done with it. Like I don't think it's ever like that. You know, I think it's a process. It's just like the seasons. It's the nature of life. It's this circle, night and day, you know, moon and sun going up and down. You were also talking about um kind of being creative, and you were also mentioning God's the heaven on earth, right? This God's creation of the winter slopes, people are having fun on it. It's great. Christianity would say that we are created in God's image. And I think being able to tap into our own creativity is tapping into God within ourselves, because that is the original creator. And so another thing you mentioned about being your truest and authentic self and kind of being in that more God-centered mode is when you're in the moment, right? When you're not concerned with identifying with thought or your ego or sufficing your own needs and getting your own needs met in yourself. Rather, you're serving this external thing. And so you get into this in the moment flow state. And I think a lot of that is just heightening our vibrations.
Yeah, it's interesting to understand a little bit more about what that flow state is and where creativity comes from. For me personally, I think my creative juices were shoved in a closet, you know, because I needed to be the tough guy. I had to be macho. I had to, be that guy. It's just the culture I came from. But when I started to work on these things and start to connect the dots as to what was going on with me, from a mental standpoint, and why I was reacting to the world negatively, and I started to work on those things, and I started to learn how to manage my thoughts a little bit better, how to meditate those things. That brought me to a place where my mind was like, my body was like, whoa, I've never been in this state. I'm always up here, So learning how to not be up here and to bring all of that down was like magical to me. It was so amazing. I didn't know I was capable of looking at my thoughts. I thought I was my thoughts, right? So now if I'm taking a step back and I'm no longer actually my thoughts, and I'm not having to react every time a thought comes up, well, that as that gap got bigger and bigger and bigger, wow, the things just started opening up. The creativity started opening up. New ideas started flowing, and I had to write. And so it was like, next thing you know, I'm having these thoughts that are coming through about, who I am, what my ego is, how I've been living, this egoic life, and now I'm figuring it out, and I'm like, oh shit, I've got to write about this. This is why I'm irritated. This is why I get frustrated. The corporate career, all of those things, that I've learned to change my environment, but brought me to a whole, I didn't expect the creativity to come flowing with it, because I didn't know that I was creative. I didn't know that I was, I love these things. I didn't know that I was, this loving and sensitive and empathetic, that I can actually help people in that way. I couldn't even really do a puzzle or read a book because, I couldn't get out of my head long enough to focus on something. And so now being able to not be caught up in here, all of a sudden it's like, man, all this creative juices are flowing. I want to learn how to play more music. I'm learning the guitar. I want to learn drums. I want to learn bass. I want to learn a lot more music. I want to read so many books. There's so many books I haven't read, and I've got just, a library just waiting for me. I want to write every day. There's so much now flowing, that I want to write about it. I want to talk about these topics because they're all new to me. This is all new. It's a different perspective of looking at life, and it's exciting. It's exciting to think of, what the possibilities are in the future. And man, if life can be this good already, and I'm still, those old programs still come back, I still get irritated, I still get stressed, I still, all of those things. But the more that I work on it, man, what's possible from a creative standpoint, and that's where I want to live in now, is that creative side. I've done the logical corporate, get her done type of masculine side. I'm ready to embrace the feminine energy within me as well. And it came back full force. And that, man, not only am I loving and all of those things, but man, I'm creative. I mean, there's just so many things that I want to learn, and I want to explore. I want to travel. I want to go see the world. When you realize stuff like this, you realize, man, I've lived in Colorado my whole life, and I haven't seen 90% of Colorado, because I haven't been in the moment. Been traveled all over the country, but I haven't enjoyed anything, so it's a very different world where I can even enjoy my time just down the street at the park way more than I ever have. So being not in your head makes a big difference in understanding who you are and who your true authentic self is. And then how you can live your life, your authentic life, and protect it. Like you said, I enjoy being who I am now, and when I feel like I'm being somebody for somebody, that's something I'm still working on, but I've got to pay attention to that.
Straight up. So all of you cats that have listened this far, go meditate, go hug a tree or something. George, the summer's going to be fun with Atmosphere and stuff. I'm really looking forward to it. And we're going to do a lot of stuff outside. It's going to be great. I'd like to thank you for coming on, man. This has been great. Religion. We did it.
It's a tough one. And that's a big part of it. I was so excited about this spring and this summer because of all of we're gonna have a packed calendar, and that's a lot of my recovery has been in nature. And so it's so awesome. We just got through this tough winter. It was cold.
Yeah, so yucky.
Yeah, and a lot of people are struggling mentally as a result of kind of a long enclosed winter. But yeah, I see the life in everybody, and I'm so excited to get out there and just enjoy life with people that just are working on themselves as well, and they're trying to get better, and we're there to support each other, and it's really cool when you see people make huge strides in their life, huge changes in their life, because it's so freaking hard. I just got off of an Atmosphere call right before this, and people are struggling, man. People are struggling, and we have to work on ourselves so that we can be there to help others and be in service for others as they are in their progression in this journey. So we enjoy it, and we get to celebrate it, on the weekends, and go out and have fun and barbecue and go tubing and bike riding and all of that stuff, as a celebration for all of the hard work that we're having to put in on a daily basis with this internal awareness that we're gaining, and we're trying to work on ourselves from not being that same old pre-programmed person, and trying to find our authentic self. So it's so exciting, and it's definitely something that we're going to continue to grow. And I love doing the podcast because we can share awareness. Love the website. My son's done an amazing job with the website, and you got the calendar out there, and it's starting to fill up, and it's going to be an exciting summer, and who knows what the future holds. That's what's so exciting about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of pain and struggling in life, but we are blessed with that because it makes the fun stuff we do even that much sweeter. So it's going to be a good summer, dude. Thanks again for coming on. It's been great to have you.
Right on, brother. Thank you. Appreciate it. Take care.